Hey, souls and spirits out there, welcome back to this sacred space where we explore the mysteries of life. And if you've been following along this summer, we've been working our way through the Hermetic principles with a few festivals thrown in the mix. We began with mentalism, learning that the universe is mental, that all things arise within the universal mind. We explored correspondence, discovering that patterns ripple across all planes of existence. We examined vibration, realizing that nothing truly stands still. We learn from polarity that opposites are often two ends of the same continuum. And today is the end of our journey through the principles. We've made it to the last one. And in many ways, it's the one that brings everything together, the principle of gender. And unfortunately, this may also be the most misunderstood principle in all of Hermetic philosophy. The moment people hear the word gender, many immediately think about biological sex, politics, cultural expectations, or modern debates surrounding identity. And those are important conversations to have in their own right. But they are not what the Kabbalion is discussing. The Hermetic principles of gender is something far broader than that, far older, far more universal in nature, and it's a principle that ancient philosophers believed could be observed in stars and atoms, in music and mathematics, psychology, spirituality, creativity, even within consciousness itself. Hermetic gender is not primarily about men and women, it's about the mystery of creation. It asks one of humanity's oldest questions. How does anything come into existence? How does an idea end up becoming a painting? How does inspiration become music? How does love become family? How does imagination become civilization? How does spirit become matter? And today we will begin by trying to answer some of those questions. There's something beautiful about the order of the 7 Hermetic principles. They are not simply 7 unrelated ideas. They form a progression. Imagine building a cathedral. First, there's the thought of it. That's mentalism. Then the blueprint reflects that vision. That is correspondence. Next comes movement. Workers begin acting. That is vibration. Choices must be made on where to put things. Materials are separated and arranged. That is polarity. Construction follows seasons and rhythm and the right timing of things. That's rhythm. Every action produces results. That's cause and effect. But none of these principles actually produce a building like a cathedral or anything until something combines it, until separate elements come together in a creative act. That final movement is gender. Gender is the principle through which potential becomes expression. It is the meeting place where creation happens. So let's begin with the words themselves. The Kabbalion tells us gender isn't everything. Everything has masculine and feminine qualities. Notice something important. It does not say that everything is biologically male or biologically female. It says everything expresses masculine and feminine principles. These are symbolic, metaphysical ideas. Hermetic teachers observed that creation often appears through complementary forces. Again, day and night, expansion, contraction, giving and receiving, electricity, magnetics, the sun and the moon, just everything. There's so much duality to everything. Breathing in and breathing out. One force initiates it, the other receives it. One projects, another nurtures. Something penetrates, one gestates. Together, something new emerges. And the emphasis is not on opposition. The emphasis is on cooperation. This distinction is essential. When Hermetic philosophers spoke of masculine and feminine principles, they were not saying that men possessed only masculine qualities and women only possessed feminine qualities. In fact, the Hermetic teachings suggest quite the opposite. Every human being contains both. Every mind expresses both. Every creative action requires both. Think about writing a book. The initial inspiration may arrive just suddenly. An idea flashes into consciousness. That resembles what Hermetics call the masculine principle. But the inspiration alone does not create the book. The idea must be nurtured and developed and edited and refined and protected, allowed to grow. That resembles feminine principles. Without inspiration, nothing begins. But without nurturing, nothing matures into being. creation requires both. And at this point, you may wonder, why even use the word gender at all? Why not simply call these active and receptive energies? And part of the answer lies in language and history. The word gender has changed significantly over the centuries. In the ancient and medieval worlds, grammatical gender, symbolic gender, and philosophical gender were common ways of describing qualities and relationships and patterns, not only just people. Many languages assigned masculine or feminine grammatical forms to objects that obviously had no biological sex. Hermetic writers inherited a symbolic vocabulary that reflected this broader way of thinking. They used masculine and feminine as archetypal descriptions of complementary forces and functions. The modern reader often approaches a text with 21st century assumptions. As a result, they sometimes read biological or social meanings into passages that were intended to describe universal creative dynamics. Understanding that historical differences helped prevent confusion. One of the most remarkable patterns in nature is that life often unfolds through complementary relationships. Rain meets earth, seed requires soil. Flowers attract the bees and they continue to pollinate things. Roots descend while branches rise. The heart contracts, then releases. The lungs inhale, then exhale. The tides advance and then retreat. Even at a cellular level, life depends upon interaction. Creation rarely happens through complete isolation. It happens through relationship. And the Hermetic principle of gender recognizes this pattern. It tells us that the universe creates through partnership, not necessarily partnership between a man and a woman, but partnership between complementary forces. Throughout today, I will use words to describe masculine and feminine in the Hermetic sense. And these terms describe qualities, not superiority. Neither is better than the other. Neither is complete without the other. The masculine principle is often associated with initiation, direction, focus, analysis, structure, decision-making, clarity, action, purpose. The feminine principle is often associated with receptivity, intuition, nurturing, gestation, creativity, relationship, patience, integration, and transformation. And notice that every one of these qualities can appear in any person. A father may embody extraordinary nurturing qualities, and a mother may display remarkable decisiveness. A teacher may alternate between structure and receptivity. An artist uses both imagination and discipline. A scientist needs intuition as well as analysis. These principles describe functions, not limitations. Imagine trying to build a house using only the plans. Nothing would ever be constructed. But now imagine trying to build without the plans. Chaos would most likely result in that. And vision requires execution, but execution requires vision. The same is true for nearly every creative process. The composer hears music inwardly, then writes notes. The sculptor may imagine the statue, then removes the stone. The gardener plants and then waits. Parents guide, then they allow to grow. The inventor may dream, and then they experiment. Again and again, we find the same pattern. Creation emerges through interaction. One force alone is incomplete. The medieval alchemists loved to illustrate this principle through symbolic imagery. Their manuscripts often showed kings and queens, a sun and a moon, gold and silver, sulfur and mercury, and these images were never meant to describe marriage alone. They represented the union of complementary principles. The ultimate goal of alchemy was not merely changing lead into gold. It was the transformation of consciousness, the union of opposites within the same human being, a reconciliation of apparent division in ourselves, the birth of the whole, the wholeness of a human. And Hermetic gender plays a central role in this symbolic process. The Kabbalion says that gender operates on every plane: physical, mental, spiritual. Physical life emerges through complementary biological processes. Mentally, it arises and then develops. Emotionally, relationships shape identity. And spiritually, contemplation and action continually interact. Even prayer can reflect this rhythm. We speak, then we listen, then we ask, then we receive, then we act, then we surrender. Again and again, creation unfolds through partnership. Notice how beautifully this final principle gathers together everything we've already learned and talked about. Mentalism gives us the idea. Correspondence reveals the pattern. Vibration sets everything into motion. Polarity differentiates possibilities. Rhythm gives the timing. Cause and effect explains how they unfold. And gender brings everything into manifestation. Without gender, the previous principles remain just potential. Gender is the doorway through which possibility becomes reality. A beautiful Egyptian example I love is the story of Nut and Geb. Differing from many myth stories, Nut is the feminine energy, is the sky. Usually they're the earth, but she's the sky. And Geb, the masculine energy, is the earth. In many depictions, Nut arches above the world, while Geb lies beneath it. Their separation creates space in which life becomes possible. Again, we find complementary forces, heaven and earth, above and below, spirit and matter. This is a living illustration of the Hermetic principle of correspondence we discussed earlier. And the universe itself becomes a relationship. Few symbols are more widely recognized than the Taoist Yang-Yin symbol, and I know I've talked about it on here before, but many people see yin and yang as opposites, and Taoism sees them as complementary. Yin represents qualities such as receptivity, darkness, inwardness, rest, intuition, and nurturing. And Yang represents the active, brightness, outwardness, structure, and expression. Already, can you hear the echo of Hermetic gender here? But Taoism adds an important lesson. Neither force is superior. Neither force can exist independently of each other. Each contains a seed of the other. And that is why the yin-yang symbol contains a white dot within the black half and a black dot within the white half. Nothing is purely one thing. Balance is dynamic, not static. Life flows because these forces continually interact with each other. Among the world's spiritual tradition, Hinduism offers many of the richest explorations of complementary forces. One of the most famous is the Shiva and Shakti. Shiva represents pure consciousness, stillness, awareness, the unchanging witness. Shakti represents energy, creation, movement, manifestation, the dynamic force of existence. Without Shakti, Shiva remains inactive. Without Shiva, Shakti lacks direction. Together, they create reality itself. Another really great representation is the idea that everything has masculine and feminine, is the images in Hindu spirituality of the Ardhanarishvara, hopefully. This deity is depicted as kind of half Shiva, half Parvati, half masculine, half feminine, one body, one being. The image teaches that ultimate reality transcends this division we have of each other. The masculine and the feminine are not separate, not enemies. They are an expression of deep unity. And many mystics throughout history have reached similar conclusions. Wholeness is not achieved by eliminating differences. Wholeness emerges through integration. Within Jewish mysticism, the tree of life contains a fascinating pattern. Early Christians sometimes spoke of Sophia, holy wisdom. Sophia appears prominently in Jewish wisdom literature and influenced Christian mysticism, but she is often personified in feminine terms, not as a separate deity, but as a symbolic expression of divine wisdom itself. Here, again, we say familiar themes: wisdom, receptivity, nurture, creation. The feminine principle appears even where people might not expect it. And two of the highest spheres on the tree of life, Bina and Chokma. Chokma often associated with wisdom and inspiration and creative impulse. Bina is associated with understanding and form and development. Again, we find a pattern: inspiration and manifestation, vision and structure, the initial spark and the vessel that receives it. Some Kabbalistic traditions describe these as masculine and feminine aspects of divine expression itself, not as separate gods and not as competing powers, but complementary divisions of sacred reality. Perhaps nowhere outside of Hermeticism is this principle more vividly expressed than in alchemy. The alchemists spoke of the sacred marriage, the union of that king and queen principle, the sun and the moon, the spirit and matter. These images symbolized inner transformation, The goal was not merely chemical, it was creation of wholeness and integration of the divided aspects of ourselves and the birth of the Philosopher's Stone, which ultimately represented spiritual realization. And in the 20th century, psychologist Carl Jung noticed similar patterns emerging within the human psyche. Jung proposed that every man contained an unconscious feminine division called anima. Every woman contained an unconscious masculine dimension called the animus. While some of Jung's ideas are debated today, his broader insight remains influential. Human beings are not psychologically one-dimensional. Wholeness requires integrated, neglected aspects of ourselves. The person who rejects emotion becomes incomplete, but the person who rejects reason is also incomplete. Growth often involves balancing qualities we once viewed as opposites. If we gather the wisdom of these traditions, several lessons emerge. First, neither masculine nor feminine principles are superior. Both are necessary. Second, every human being contains qualities associated with both. Third, balance creates health. Extreme imbalance creates suffering. Fourth, creation requires cooperation. And fifth, the deepest reality often transcends the very distinctions it creates. The goal is not choosing one side. The goal is becoming whole. And that is the goal with all of the Hermetic principles we've talked about recently. They are here to help us on our journey of progression. And with that, we have reached the end of our journey through the 7 Hermetic principles. From the universal mind to everyday life, the teachings may be ancient, but their invitation remains timeless. To live consciously, to seek balance, to participate in creation, and to become whole. The goal is to embody these principles and allow them to transform themselves in us and how we see ourselves, how we treat others, how we move through the world. And I could have said so much more on these principles, but I really wanted to hopefully get to the heart of each one so you could understand how they could integrate into your life. And so I hope these teachings continue to inspire you on your journey. And today, since we're at the end of this part of our journey, I'd like to end with a blessing and a prayer I've written. So, divine source, infinite intelligence, creator known by so many names, thank you for the lessons of this journey. Thank you for teaching us to think consciously, to recognize sacred patterns, to move through life's vibrations, to transform polarity into understanding, and to trust the rhythm of growth, to create causes worthy of the future, to balance the creative forces within ourselves, help us become wise, help us become compassionate, help us become courageous, help us become whole. And may our thoughts serve truth, may our words serve healing, and may our actions serve love. May our lives become expressions of the wisdom we seek, and may we remember that every moment offers another opportunity to begin again. So may it be. I'll see you soon.